All right, we're looking at lesson 37 today, chemical compounds, and then we're going to look at parallelograms. Do what? It is kind of related to science, I guess. But I don't know. I don't think it's that difficult. So we have a chemical formula for water is H2O. If we have 3,600 grams of water, what is the weight of the oxygen? And then it tells you oxygen is 16 and hydrogen is 1. It has to deal with your ratio. It isn't the ratio. How many hydrogens do we have? How much do the hydrogens weigh? 1 each. So how much do all of the hydrogens weigh? Does that make sense? You've got 2 hydrogens. They each weigh 1. So the total of them is 2. For the oxygen, how many oxygens do we have? 1. How much does it weigh? Does that make sense? What's our total? So the total weight of the compound is 18. It says, what is the weight of the oxygen? Well, what is our weight of 1 oxygen? We only have 1 of them. 16 out of the 18 are oxygen, right? They tell us that the total is 3,600. But how much of that is going to be oxygen? Does that make sense? Yeah, this reduces to 8 over 9. All right, so what would you get for X? Does that make sense? You solve your proportion, and it's in grams. Y'all see how that works? Any questions there? It's just another type of proportion problem. Okay. Looking at this one, chemical formula for ammonia is NH3. They're not going to say use the chemical formula for ammonia and find out this. They're going to tell you what it is every time. Okay. And they're also going to tell you H is 1 and N is 14. They're not going to expect you to know that. Does that make sense? Okay. So the nitrogen. How many nitrogens do we have? We have 1 of them. How much do they weigh? So if you only have 1, your total weight is 14. Does that make sense? For the hydrogen, how many do we have? They each weigh, so your total weight is just 3. Do what? Yeah, the one that you find on the periodic table. But they're not going to expect you to remember it for a math class. In science, you would have to know it, but not in. So what's the total weight? Okay, so it wants to know about the nitrogen. Well, what proportion would I set up for the nitrogen? 14 nitrogens out of the total 17. Does that make sense? What would I set up for my other proportion? This is the amount of nitrogen. The total is 510. Does that make sense? Or they will move it for you. What would you get for X? What? Yeah. Y'all see how that works? Any questions on this one? see if you can figure this one out yourself. Yeah, they're bigger numbers, but it's the same concept. Yeah, Cl is chlorine. Hydrogen, there are 4 hydrogens. No, like chlorine is the C. They're not going to give you sodium, which is Na, to tell you, like they would say sodium, which is Na or whatever. They're going to use ones that the same letter for it starts with. Someone want to go fill in the proportion? Okay, always, but you agree? 35 over 53 equals x over 16. Okay. What would be the weight of the nitrogen? There's one of them, and it weighs 14. What would be the rate? The weight. So there are 4 of them, and they each weigh 1. And then what would be the rate? The weight of the chlorine. So what do you get for a total? You add those up, you get 53. Does that make sense? I don't know what 1060 times 35 is off the top of my head. That's what I get to. Does that make sense? Any questions on these? Sean asked, are they always going to be whole numbers? I wouldn't say that they'll always be whole numbers, but if I get a decimal, I'm going to rework it. Does that make sense? Just like on for which one? Yeah, yeah. On that one, I'm trying to think of the other word problem. The one it was like, oh, what was that question asking about? Like it increased by 120% overnight. That one. Normally those are going to be whole numbers too. Okay, so if I get a fraction or a decimal, I'm going to rework those. I'm not saying that it's going to be wrong if you get a fraction or decimal. It's just usually a whole number. Does that make sense? All right, so parallelograms. They are defined as a quadrilateral. Y'all know what a quadrilateral is? It has 4 sides. It has 2 pairs of parallel sides. Getting ready for geometry. These 2 sides are parallel, and these 2 are parallel. Opposite sides are parallel. Does that make sense? Have y'all dealt with parallelograms before? There are 4 other properties that deal with parallelograms. The pairs of parallel sides are congruent. So if this side is 10, this side over here is going to be 10. If this side is 100, that side is going to be 100. They equal the same thing. Does that make sense? So these are parallel and congruent, and these are parallel and congruent. Angles that are opposite each other are also congruent. Yes. It's kind of, but those add up to 180. These two are the same thing. If this angle is 50, that angle is 50. Whereas in a circle, huh? So in a circle, they're not going to be parallelograms. I mean, I guess they could be, but it's usually not going to be a parallelogram. It's just one. And then these two are going to be equal. What do you mean? We had a lesson Monday or last Thursday maybe, where we have a circle and you have a quadrilateral. This angle and that angle add up to 180. But that's not a, yeah, these two add up to 180. But this is a parallelogram. That is not a parallelogram. That's the difference. It's just a quadrilateral. Because it's two sets of parallel congruent sides. Okay. Then any two adjacent angles add up to 180. This angle and this angle add up to 180. Or this angle right here and this angle add up to 180. The two angles that are right next to each other always add up to 180. The opposite angles are congruent. These two, 50 and 130, add up to 180. 130 and 50 add up to 180. 50 and 130 add up to 180. And 130 and 50 add up to 180. That's always true. Does that make sense? And then the last one, the diagonals bisect each other. This segment is the same as that segment. Whatever their lengths are, they're equal. And then whatever this one is, it's the same as that. Yeah, kind of. So if this one is 10, this one is 10. If this one's 8, that one is 8. They could all four be the same thing. They're usually not going to. Yes. The diagonal. Any questions on these properties? Okay. It tells us it is a parallelogram. It tells us the angle of BAD is 65 degrees. It wants us to find angle ADC and angle CCB. That angle is 65 degrees. Do what? BCD has to be 65 degrees because they're opposite, and opposite angles are congruent. Does that make sense? And then what about ABC? 115. And what does ADC have to be? 115. These two add up to 180. Consecutive angles always add up to 180 degrees. Because I didn't have this angle, and I don't know any of these angles. I don't know what the inside angles are. I don't know what these four angles are on the inside. So you don't want to use a triangle right next to each other. Consecutive integers, 3, 4, 5. Right. Any other questions on these? Okay, now we have to find x and y. Are you paying attention? Or are you doing homework? Okay. How would you find x and y? Do you agree? Okay, so x would have to be what? And y would be the diagonals bisect. Whatever this segment is, that has to be the same thing. And then whatever this segment is, this one has to be the same thing. Y'all see how that works? All right, see if you can find the value of x and y. Okay, you don't need them. What property are you going to be using? Okay, what consecutive angle would you use? D and A, because they both have x in it. If you use this one, if you use E and C, that doesn't really help you since one has x and one has y. Does that make sense? So what do we know about 5x plus 10 and 10x plus 50? Add them up. Does that make sense? So 15x equals 120. So x would equal, yes. So this is angle C, and it has y. Which angle do we want to use to find the value? You want to use A. What does this angle have to equal? 80 plus 50 equals 130. Does that make sense? And what do we know about angle C? It equals 130. So y plus 10 equals 130. So what does y equal? See how that works? You're not going to have to say, these are the four properties of a parallelogram. You're going to have to use them. Does that make sense? You don't have to know those word for word. You have to